Have you ever wondered why the most powerful kingdom in ancient history suddenly vanished from the earth? The book of 2 Kings reveals one of history's most shocking collapses and the divine warnings that predicted it centuries in advance. What you're about to discover will change how you view power, faith, and the consequences of ignoring moral boundaries forever. Welcome to the ultimate deep dive into 2 Kings, where we'll uncover palace conspiracies, miraculous healings, and the dramatic downfall of two entire nations. I'm going to walk you through every major event, character, and lesson from this incredible biblical book that reads like the most intense historical drama ever written. 2 Kings picks up immediately where 1 Kings left off, continuing the epic saga of Israel's divided kingdom around 850 BC. The northern kingdom of Israel and southern kingdom of Judah are now separate nations, each with their own kings, problems, and destinies. But this isn't just ancient history. It's a masterclass in leadership, consequences, and the power of choices that echo through generations. Let's start with one of the most spectacular moments in biblical literature. The prophet Elijah, after years of confronting evil kings and performing miracles, doesn't die a normal death. Instead, he's taken up to heaven in a whirlwind with chariots and horses of fire. His successor Elisha receives a double portion of Elijah's spirit and immediately proves it by parting the Jordan River with Elijah's cloak. This dramatic transition sets the tone for everything that follows. Elisha becomes the central prophetic figure for the first half of 2 Kings, and his miracles are absolutely mind-blowing. He purifies poisoned water with salt, calls down bears to protect him from mockers, multiplies oil to save a widow from debt, raises a dead child back to life, feeds 100 men with 20 loaves of bread, and heals a Syrian military commander named Naaman from leprosy. Each miracle demonstrates God's power working through his prophet, but they also serve specific purposes in the larger narrative. The healing of Naaman is particularly fascinating because it reveals how God's power transcends national boundaries. Naaman, a powerful Syrian general, has leprosy and reluctantly seeks help from Elisha based on advice from an Israeli slave girl. When Elisha tells him to wash 7 times in the Jordan River, Naaman initially refuses because Syrian rivers seem superior. But when he finally obeys, he's completely healed and declares that Israel's God is the only true God. This story shows how pride can blind us to simple solutions and how God's grace extends to unexpected people. Meanwhile, the political situation grows increasingly complex. The northern kingdom of Israel experiences a series of violent coups and assassinations. King after king rises to power through murder and conspiracy, creating a cycle of instability that weakens the nation from within. Jehu's bloody purge of Ahab's family fulfills prophetic warnings, but also establishes a pattern of violence that haunts the kingdom. In the southern kingdom of Judah, we encounter some of the most dramatic characters in biblical history. Queen Athaliah seizes power by murdering most of the royal family, but the infant prince Joash is secretly saved and hidden in the temple for 6 years. When Joash is finally revealed and crowned king, Athaliah is executed, and the kingdom experiences spiritual renewal. This episode demonstrates how evil can seem to triumph temporarily, but justice ultimately prevails. King Hezekiah emerges as one of Judah's greatest monarchs, implementing massive religious reforms and trusting God during seemingly impossible circumstances. When the Assyrian emperor Sennacherib besieges Jerusalem with a massive army, the situation appears hopeless. The Assyrian commander taunts the people, claiming no God can save them because Assyria has conquered every other nation. But Hezekiah prays desperately, and the prophet Isaiah promises divine intervention. That night, an angel of death sweeps through the Assyrian camp, killing 185,000 soldiers. Sennacherib retreats to Assyria, where he's later murdered by his own sons. This miraculous deliverance becomes one of the most celebrated victories in Jewish history, proving that faith in God can overcome impossible odds. However, Hezekiah's story also includes a crucial mistake. When Babylonian ambassadors visit Jerusalem, Hezekiah proudly shows them all his treasures and military resources. Isaiah warns that this display of wealth will eventually lead to Babylon conquering Judah and carrying away everything Hezekiah showed them. This prophecy plants the seeds for the book's tragic conclusion. The northern kingdom's end comes through gradual decline and ultimate conquest. Despite prophetic warnings, the kings continue practicing idolatry and oppressing their people. God sends prophet after prophet, but the messages are ignored or rejected. Finally, the Assyrian Empire conquers Israel, destroys its capital Samaria, and deports the population to distant lands. The 10 northern tribes essentially disappear from history, scattered among foreign nations and losing their identity forever. Judah survives longer, but eventually follows the same destructive path. King Manasseh represents the absolute worst of royal leadership, promoting child sacrifice, witchcraft, and every form of idolatry imaginable. His 55-year reign corrupts the entire nation so thoroughly that even later reforms cannot fully restore spiritual health. King Josiah attempts the most comprehensive religious revival in Judah's history. When workers discover an ancient scroll of the law during temple repairs, Josiah realizes how far the nation has strayed from God's commands. He destroys every idol and pagan shrine throughout the kingdom, reinstates proper worship, and leads the people in renewing their covenant with God. For a brief moment, it seems like Judah might escape destruction. But Josiah's tragic death in battle against Pharaoh Necho marks the beginning of the end. His successors abandon his reforms and return to the very practices he eliminated. The final chapters chronicle Judah's rapid decline through a series of weak kings who become puppets of foreign powers. The book reaches its climax with Nebuchadnezzar's siege of Jerusalem. After a brutal blockade that creates famine conditions, the Babylonians breach the city walls, capture King Zedekiah, execute his sons before his eyes, blind him, and drag him away in chains. The magnificent temple Solomon built is stripped of its treasures and burned to the ground. The palace and every important building in Jerusalem are destroyed, and the surviving population is marched away to exile in Babylon. 2 Kings ends on a surprisingly hopeful note. After 37 years in Babylonian prison, the former king Jehoiakim is released and honored at the Babylonian court. This small gesture suggests that God hasn't completely abandoned his promises to David's dynasty, even though the kingdom has fallen. The themes running through 2 Kings remain incredibly relevant today. The book demonstrates how leadership character affects entire nations, how ignoring moral boundaries leads to inevitable consequences, and how spiritual compromise gradually destroys what previous generations built. It shows that God's patience has limits, but also that his mercy can appear in unexpected ways. Most importantly, 2 Kings reveals that true security doesn't come from military power, political alliances, or economic prosperity. The kingdoms that trusted in these things ultimately collapsed, while those who genuinely sought God experienced protection and blessing, at least temporarily. The archaeological evidence supporting 2 Kings' historical accuracy continues growing, with discoveries confirming details about specific kings, battles, and political events. This isn't mythology, it's real history with profound spiritual lessons. As you reflect on 2 Kings, consider how its themes apply to modern leadership, personal choices, and spiritual priorities. The same principles that determined ancient kingdoms' fates still operate today, making this ancient book surprisingly contemporary and urgently relevant for anyone seeking to understand how faith, character, and consequences interact in real life.